Okay, welcome back. Hope you all had a great week. Today we're continuing our BCBA exam practice question series where we're going through a set of BCBA exam practice questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. I really appreciate it. We do BCBA videos every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you're looking for our proven study materials at an affordable price, please check out bcbastudy.com. We offer a 5th edition task list study guide, 3 full practice exams, and a combo pack, which includes everything, including flashcards. It's our best deal. Questions or comments, please let me know. I'd love to help. Other than that, let's keep working hard, keep studying hard, get to our questions. Question 1. A behavior analyst instructs his technicians to record how many times John touches someone else's personal items during a session. John officially engaged in the behavior 15 times on Monday and Tuesday. The RBTs recorded 15 times for this behavior on both Monday and Tuesday. This data lacks what? First question we ask ourselves, what does the question want to know? What is the question asking? The question wants to know about the data being taken. And does that data lack any component of what we consider good data? Now, good data consists of what? Accuracy, reliability, and validity. Accuracy says we're measuring the true amount of how much that behavior occurred, how long that behavior occurred, the true value of the behavior. Reliability says we can measure the same thing over and over and over and over again. Validity says we're measuring the behavior we intend to measure. All three are needed to get very good data. You can have accuracy and reliability and lack validity. You can have reliability and validity, lack accuracy, so on and so forth. With that said, let's look at our data. We know we are supposed to be recording how many times John touches someone else's personal items during a session. So we know John officially engaged in this behavior 15 times. So if we want accurate data, we would need to record this behavior happening 15 times. So our question tells us the RBT is recorded 15 times. So we know the data is accurate. Now, what about reliable? Can our RBTs record this data several times in a row? Well, we know they're at least reliable for the 2 days that we have data on, which were Monday and Tuesday. So we can say so far the RBTs are reliable. And what about valid? Did the RBTs record the correct behavior? Well, it says they recorded 15 times for this behavior on both Monday and Tuesday. So there is validity here. The RBT's data was accurate, it was reliable, and it was valid. So what does the data lack out of these three? D, none of the above. 3 clients were all sitting in chairs, taking turns, asking each other questions. This goes on for 10 minutes. At the end of the 10 minutes, the RBT asked, did we keep our hands to ourselves to the entire group? If they did, they earn a minute. If they did not, they earn 0 minutes. This most likely represents what type of contingency? Immediately, we should be thinking group contingencies. What is the question asking? It's asking about the specific type of group contingency. What do we know? We know we have 3 clients sitting in chairs asking each other questions. Once they are done at the end of 10 minutes, they are asked as a group, did we keep our hands to ourselves? So the entire group has to answer to this question. If they did, meaning the entire group, they will all earn a minute. If they did not, if the entire group did not, they earn 0 minutes. What type of group contingency requires the entire group to engage in the target behavior? A dependent group contingency. We consider a dependent group contingency a contingency that involves typically a group relying on one person or a small subset of people to engage in the behavior in order to earn reinforcement. In this case, we need the entire group to engage in the behavior, so we're not dependent on anybody. We're dependent on the entire group. B, independent group contingency should be self-explanatory. You are reliant on yourself, or the learners are reliant on themselves to engage in the behavior. If the learner engages in the behavior, they earn reinforcement regardless of what the rest of the group does. So it leaves us with C, interdependent group contingency. And that's what we're talking about here. The group is interdependent. They all are depending on each other, engaging in our target behavior. And they all have to engage in that target behavior if they wish to receive reinforcement. Non-contingency, well, it is contingent. The minute is contingent on keeping hands to ourselves. So this most likely represents what type of contingency? It's going to be C, an interdependent group contingency. Which of the following is an incorrect way to write an operant contingency? So let's be very careful here, right? We're looking for an incorrect way, the wrong way to write an operant contingency. Now, what type of behavior do we consider in ABA? Well, we're looking at operant behavior, right? Behavior maintained by consequences. The other type we know of or we acknowledge is respondent behavior, right? Respondent behavior is evoked by stimuli, but not necessarily maintained by consequences. So a respondent contingency would be written how? Well, that's going to be our SR contingency, right? Our two-term contingency, the stimulus response. So if we're looking at an operant contingency, could we write it as an RS, a response stimulus? Well, sure, because that response is going to be maintained, decreased, increased by the stimulus that follows, by the consequence. And when the consequence maintains the response, we consider that operant. And we could definitely write it RS. If we look at B, the SR, that's going to be our respondent behavior. That's not what we're looking for with the operant contingency. What about an SRS? Sure, if we want to include the antecedent in the operant contingency, we are welcome to do that. You'll most commonly see it written as SRS or ABC. Very rarely are you going to see it written as RS. C and D are the most common ways to write our operant contingencies. D, ABC, obviously the antecedent behavior consequence. We all know this. This is what we use in practice typically. So the incorrect way to write an operant contingency would be writing a respondent contingency, right? Which would be stimulus response or SR. A young boy constantly shakes his hands when it is cold outside. His mom tells him to put his hands in his pockets when this occurs, so he does. Anytime it is cold, the mom tells the boy to put his hands in his pockets because the behavior gets on her nerves. The mom's behavior is most likely maintained by what? Let's be very careful here. What is the question asking? The question is asking about the mom's behavior. So we need to identify what's going on in regards to the mom's behavior, not necessarily the young boys. You have to be very careful about that when you're tackling behavior questions. Let's look at the mom's behavior. We know a young boy constantly shakes his hands when it's cold outside. When he does that, his mom tells him to put his hands in his pocket. So what is the antecedent? The antecedent is the young boy shaking his hands when it's cold. The behavior is mom telling him to put hands in pockets. The consequence is he puts his hands in his pockets. So what is the mom accomplishing? Well, we know the behavior gets on her nerves, right? So by him putting his hands in his pockets, she is escaping the handshaking. Now think about that, right? The young boy shaking his hands. The mom tells him to put his hands in his pockets. He does. Mom has escaped handshaking. And so if we're taking something away and increasing or maintaining our behavior, what are we talking about? Is it positive reinforcement? With positive reinforcement, we are adding something. Okay. The consequence is we're removing the shaking of the hands. It's not positive punishment because the mom's behavior is going to be reinforced or maintained. So it's going to be negative reinforcement or removing shaking of his hands by putting his hands in his pocket, therefore continuing or increasing mom's behavior of asking him to put his hands in his pocket when he does shake his hands. It's not negative punishment because punishment obviously decreases. So the mom's behavior is going to be maintained by, or most likely maintained by, negative reinforcement. Behavior analysts take appropriate steps to protect the rights of clients, stakeholders, supervisees, and trainees in public statements. Who do behavior analysts prioritize? Now, when we make public statements as behavior analysts, we represent the field, we represent our colleagues, we represent our clients, we represent autism in general, right? If you work with autism, if you work in business management, you represent that population. Behavior analysts have a responsibility to withhold ethical value when making public statements. And part of that is protecting the rights, including privacy rights of clients, stakeholders, supervisors, and trainees. Now, when we do this, if we were going to make a chart or a hierarchy, who do we prioritize? Who is our number one priority? Is it ourselves, the client, the stakeholders, or the supervisees? Well, it's not going to be the stakeholders, right? Because the client's always going to trump the stakeholders. It's not necessarily going to be your supervisees. The supervisees aren't going to take precedent over the clients. And it's certainly not going to be yourself. You're certainly not going to take precedent over the client. According to the ethical code, when making public statements, we prioritize our client over everybody else. First and foremost, we prioritize client, and we want to prioritize, of course, following the law. But as far as the human aspect goes, we want to prioritize clients. You're leaving a parking garage with your parking ticket that you received when you first parked. You watch the car in front of you put their parking ticket into the machine, and then the gate opens. You copy this behavior when it is your turn at the machine. This would be an example of what? Okay, what is the question asking about? It's asking about your behavior of copying this car in front of you. So if you're copying this behavior, what does that sound like? To me, it sounds like imitation. Imitation is immediately engaging in a behavior you observe with typically a model or a person doing that behavior. So you watch somebody do the behavior and you immediately afterwards follow and do that behavior as well. So if you're in a parking garage with a parking ticket and you're watching the car in front of you put their parking ticket in the machine, and from that behavior, you learn how to do it and you copy that behavior, is that planned or unplanned reinforcement? Well, no, that's not necessarily a thing or what's going on here, right? We're talking about imitation. We're imitating the car in front of us. So is the car in front of us a planned model or an unplanned model? Well, a planned model is exactly what it sounds like. We contrive it. We set it up to where we're trying to evoke a particular behavior, typically from a learner. And we're going through the planning process of the model. This is considered an unplanned model, and most imitation in the natural environment is unplanned. It's when you hear people say, well, my client is starting to act like the other kids in this class, those are unplanned models. This car was not planned for you. However, watching the car taught you the correct behavior. You imitated that behavior, making the car a model. So you copying this behavior of this car in front of you would be an example of an unplanned model. Before using imitation training as part of an intervention package, it is imperative that your learner can do what? What is it crucial? What is the most important thing that our learner can do or needs to be able to do to imitate? Okay, so think about imitation. We have to be able to watch a model or somebody else engage in the behavior in order to engage in that behavior ourselves. Does the learner need to self-manage? Well, no, not necessarily. You can teach very young children. Very young children engage in imitation, and they're not capable of self-management. What about identifying potential reinforcers? Again, not necessarily, right? Think of like highly impacted individuals or very young children who might not be able to correctly identify potential reinforcers yet. It is not a prereq for imitation. What about attending to a model? Absolutely. No matter what age, what impact, who you are, if you can't attend to a model, you can't imitate. That is a prereq. That is a necessary requirement for imitation training. And then D, verbally communicate. Most imitation is non-verbal anyway, so verbally communicating really has no bearing on if you can imitate or not. Before using imitation training as part of an intervention package, it is imperative that your learner can attend to a model. What performance dimensions of behavior are able to be modified using shaping? Now, when we use shaping, we are reinforcing approximations of behavior to reach a terminal behavior. So can we shape topography? Certainly. If you have a functional behavior that looks a certain way, but you want it to look a different way, you could go through the shaping process. As the person gets closer to how you want that behavior to look, you give more and more reinforcement. Think about sports and the correct way to say, swing a baseball bat. The person might be able to swing the baseball bat, but you want them to swing it in a way that looks different. So you would start to shape that topography until it reached the point of your pleasing or the terminal behavior. What about inter-response time? We could also shape inter-response time to where it's less than or more than, just depending on what we're trying to accomplish, right? You slowly reinforce for less inter-response time or slowly reinforce for more. Just depends. And then magnitude, so the intensity of the behavior, so to speak. You can certainly increase magnitude. Think about voice volume, right? We want our clients to speak louder or softer, okay? Slowly shaping that behavior down to an appropriate volume. What performance dimension of behavior, what performance dimensions of behavior are able to be modified using shaping? A, B, and C. So D, all the above. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. If you're looking for our proven study materials, please check out bcbastudy.com. We offer 3 practice exams, a 5th edition task list study guide, and our combo pack, which comes with everything. Questions, comments, let me know. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.